Now, you mentioned, a lot of people and maybe zerging, which was actually one of the things that we were hoping Nice was going to say because we got Steven to say early on, but that was on the bingo card was for Nice to say zerging. But was talking about like risk versus rewards. Like, well, death penalties are threat of PKing lead players, zerging bosses and dungeons to minimize risk and thus trivializing the content. And Steven actually said that's part of the design is that the reward is finite. And there'll be systems to determine who gets the reward. So if you bring a group of 100 people, only 10 of them may get any sort of reward. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's good. I think that's good. I don't know that it'll discourage zerging because I think, if you're struggling with a boss, you're still going to just bring a lot of people and just trivialize the content. That's what happens. And I mean, they did that sort of stuff in Lineage 2 and Arcade, but people still just zerged the boss. And that's part of the problem with those games, which Ashes has addressed to some extent with bigger map and less fast travel, but we'll see. The bosses also roam, and the bosses don't respawn in the same spot, and they're not on a timer, which helps a little bit, but I think there's still going to be some zerging, even though you still have to divide the drops out a little bit more.
There's that, and I mean, before I touch on the next one, what are your thoughts, Virtek? Because there's a couple that go along with this as well.
Yeah, I have so many opinions about the zerging of bosses and the PvE content in the game that they all come to the culmination of there's going to be large groups of people looking for something to do on a scheduled raid night. And that means there's going to be large groups looking for any boss that's up. And on the way, as soon as they hit the second or third site where everything's already down, they're going to start taking out caravans. And maybe that'll keep them out of the rest of the raids or the rest of the world boss runs or what have you.
Yeah.
But like any kind of scheduled night to do something is completely out the window. And I'd like to also add into all of that I'm open to seeing how it tests out. I'm open to see how it happens, but I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot less scheduled events with guilds, like a lot less.
The other thing to go along with that is, will there be mechanisms in boss fights that protect from PvP, such as lockouts? And Steven said some of them will, yes. Some can be interrupted, as is the design, as in terms of a PvP group interrupting a PvE group, or like a group of people PvEing. Something about, this is me saying something about stat dampening, because to be fair, I had it on 2 times speed and I was writing notes like a madwoman. But there'll be a stat dampening mechanic on the losing party over time, and there are some encounter design to be dynamic regardless of instancing. So the state tree based off of what players are doing and adaptive scaling and quantity of participants. And if that sounds like gibberish, basically the boss has AI capabilities and can see what is happening in front of it and then determine how to act based off of that. That is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that could be pretty neat. I could also see that as being an absolute way for one guild to troll another one too in the PvE content. Is they're gonna have their, all right, everybody take off all your gear, get ready, okay, run into the boss room, let's make sure the boss does his wipe mechanic, because then we're gonna send our raid group in next. 3, 2, 1, go. And then they flood the room with 40 people with a raid that's supposed to take 20 to 30. And that boss goes haywire and explodes the entire room. They wait for it to clean up. The second group walks in and they engage. And now the other group has to, recombobulate themselves, regroup before they can even try and attempt the boss.
Yeah.
And now everybody who was in that group died, and now they have experience debt, which also dampens their stats. So they're gonna have a harder time fighting back the PvP horde that just came, or the fighting back via PvP methods in order to reclaim the space, because they now have stat dampening from experience loss.
Yeah.
Is that what they said? That when you wipe, the boss gets easier? Is that what they?
No, the boss doesn't get easier. It's if a player dies and they get experience debt, it's supposed to like dampen your stats over time. So if the players die and they come back and they want to try to reclaim the space, because as far as I know, there hasn't been any like statement about raid bosses are gonna have any differential when it comes to experience debt or durability or anything like that. As far as I know, it's going to be the same as like open world. So there's going to be gear damage. There's going to be experience debt. So they're going to be weaker. They're going to come back and try and claim that space or fight that boss again, and they're going to be weaker and they're going to have a harder time doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing in relation to that, I thought this was interesting because we were talking about Carphin at the beginning of this show. And a question was put out about how large or intricate can we expect dungeons to be in order to accommodate many groups. And this is kind of a multifaceted question, as Nice was getting away with multiple times and Steven was going, something's not quite right here.
I see what you're doing here.
But he said, while majority are open world, some are contained. There's party instance, raid instance, etc. Not all hunting areas will be the same. The rarity value will differ between them. I mean, we know this about seasons. We know this about parts of the world, etc. Carphin Tower itself has the tower part and then the wreckage at the bottom. And the wreckage area beneath caters to groups of 3 to 5 players. And then the tower is intended for full parties, 8 players. And there are 5 levels of Carphin Tower, and each support 3 to 4 full groups of players. So 3 to 4 times 8 people on each level. And the idea is that you kind of piece away at it and kind of maybe claim your area within Carphin, and that you're spending a lot of time in Carphin. And, perhaps if another player's pulling on the mobs that you're trying to attack, that could cause some PvP issues. Not PvP issues, but like a reason to PvP. Thoughts?
Yeah, open world dungeons that I've experienced, PvP definitely happens quite a bit. With the corruption system in Ashes, maybe it won't happen as much because of the penalty, but there will be, certainly. It's just almost instantly. The dungeons I've been in that are open world and other MMOs, it's just a bloodbath inside of them. So I kind of expect that to be the same in Ashes, but we'll see. Maybe it won't be.
Yeah. I mean, fingers crossed either way on that.
I was a little surprised at how many people he said could be in there. It doesn't look that big when they've shown it, but I guess it is pretty big. So,
I mean, every time I can think of on the stream, it's been off in the distance too.
True.
Yeah, there's been the one time where they went in and they fought that mimic, right? Mm-hmm. They're going crazy because the mimic was trying to eat Steven. Jumping around.
That just gave me free run idea.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it looked pretty large, but that being said, still, who just did the math? Somebody just did the math. Lloyd. 3 to 4 parties of 8 people, so 24 to 32 people, and that on 6 floors equals approximately 160 to 192 players in Carphin.
That's a lot
at one time.
Yeah.
Can you imagine just kind of like walking up and be like, oh, I don't know where anybody is at. Like, oh, there's not anybody out here. And you just like waltz up to Carphin. Here comes this flood of people coming out of Carphin out of nowhere. I would be mortified, but like, no, I'm gone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, as long as the kill timer isn't, or sorry, you go ahead. You're the guest. You first.
Oh no, I didn't have anything too important to say. But as many people are on the server, the dungeons do have to house, a lot of people. I know there's going to be a lot of dungeons, but they're going to have to house a lot of people for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, Riverlands alone is what as big as New World.
Yep, roughly, yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's that.
Yeah.
And in theory, and by in theory I mean like I really hope so, that there's going to be plenty of these dungeons and raids floating around. Like I don't even know, did they state if that's anything about if that's kind of a common design for them as far as how many players it can hold and what it's designed for? Do you recall if he said anything about that, or if that was just they were only he was only talking about
Hi there.
Carphin at that point?
Well, he was asked about all, and then he said there's going to be different sizes. I'm pretty sure he said something like that, didn't he? In the first part of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they were asked about like how large or intricate they can expect dungeons to be in order to accommodate many groups, and he ended up answering specifically about Carphin.
Yeah.
So I think that's all he's willing to share at this time.
Okay, so well, I think that's probably going to be an example of a giant dungeon then, because he said it's intended for full parties of 8 players, rather than like a raid of 24 to 32 to 40 or whatever it is that they're aiming for at the end.
Yeah.
So in theory, that could just be a giant dungeon, which makes me kind of wonder if the world were to see, let's say, 1 raid per metro, because they just get up to a tier and something happens that unlocks a raid. And then there's also miscellaneous dungeons for some of the level 5 nodes out there, and other just random events that are scheduled around the world no matter what. Like I think Carphin was one of those, right? It's out there and it's going to happen depending on what happens in the server, but it's not dependent on a node level or something. I don't know. I forget exactly how that one was described, but
yeah, I can tell you.
Either way, if there's a good handful of those, then maybe, and this is me crossing my fingers and saying I hope so, maybe that will actually take care of a lot of my fears of PvE kind of being kind of tossed to the side and not really having much to do, because PvP is going to dominate the entire game.
Yeah.
I still think it's going to be a wrench that can be thrown in the cogs no matter what, but I'm hoping that there's going to be so much to do that most servers will be able to have something for guilds to do on a quote unquote raid night, instead of walking around going, well, Tuesday's jacked, we got nothing, so let's just go destroy some caravans.
Right.